Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 for 2019 of CrowCast Tuesday Night Live, brought to you by no one at the moment. So if you own a business and you'd like to get on board like our friends down at the Strawberry Farm did towards the end of last season, this would be your spot, so get in touch. Joining me tonight is the usual suspects. Welcome, Peter. How are you going?
G'day, mate. How are you tonight?
I'm very well, thanks. Macca, how are you doing?
Doing really good. Fighting fit.
Fighting fit. And Nikki, not so much, but making the effort. So thanks, Nick. How are you going?
As I said before, I'm here.
Well, that's the main thing. And so am I. So without any further ado, why don't we kick into some Crows news, shall we?
I reckon, Nikki, this is one for you to jump up and down about, but I thought probably one of the probably most, I don't know, what would you call it, upsetting, annoying bits of news was the incident that came, you really shouldn't even call it an incident, but the goal celebration that came out of the AFLW game with Sarah Perkins and the knocking over of the other player and the consequent Fox Footy putting it out on in the media, and there was a whole lot of really rotten and ugly, disgusting comments that accompanied that. So it was newsworthy in the sense that it certainly hit the airwaves, and just one of those really crappy things that can happen, particularly with social media.
Yeah, very much so. So what actually happened was that's a goal celebration that Perko does with Rhianne Metcalf. And so because she's out for the season, Hatchie was like, well, I'll do it with you. It was fine except for the fact that when she landed, I think Perkins actually landed on her foot, on Hatchard's foot, and that's what made her fall down. And she had the biggest grin on her face. What was annoying was about it was a really funny moment and they were laughing about it in the hug. But the problem with Fox Footy was what they did, the clip that they took, they didn't have that little bit of the aftermath of that smiling and laughing. So people who hadn't watched the game all of a sudden got up in arms because they didn't see the entire context, which is often the case with a lot of stuff on Twitter, and the worst place to read the comments on Facebook. Hi to all our listeners on Facebook, by the way.
Well done, Nikki.
And that's what it was. So I actually think Perkins did the right thing because there were 1.9 thousand comments. I never got to see what those were, but I did hear that the majority of them were pretty negative. Perko had a lot of support on Twitter, and it took Fox Footy ages to actually take that post down. Now, we've got a problem as well, which there was a great article in The Guardian this week, and the name of the writer has escaped me, but she also took to task the AFL, particularly around this issue, in that on their Facebook page, on all the stuff to do with AFLW when it's been promoted, these type of comments are going on there and they're not moderating those comments out, which they should be doing.
Why? Why should they be doing that?
We don't have the right to free speech, which a lot of people like to claim. Australia does not have that right. We have the right to freedom of expression, but it's only within some particular scenarios. Those comments are very derogatory. They're very slanderous. They do not have a place in the discussion when they're on that level. We have the same thing for a lot of us. Where all of us met was on Big Footy. There's certain things we're not allowed to say on there. There's things that are banned. There's things that will get post deleted. So I am actually all for responsible moderation, and the AFL's not doing that. They're just letting everything go by kind of what we can see. It's once again to me, and Phoenix, you and I have talked about this, and I talked about a lot with Scorpus last year when we were doing a lot of this AFLW stuff, it just seems really obvious how much value or how little value the AFL is actually placing on this, and the fact that the women are having to come out and say for themselves, hey, this is just not on. We've had a lot of instances last year regarding bullying on social media towards players. We've lost players to the game through depression. It's a really big issue, not just against our female players, but it's also something that's against our male players. But it's been highlighted very much with what seems to be a lot more vitriol and a lot more focus towards our female players at the moment. And it's just, if you cannot say that to somebody's face, don't freaking put it in a comment and post it.
I don't know
it's
about
as simple as that.
It is a little bit over the top what you just said, in the sense that we all have opinions on things. And look, I'm not supporting some of the comments that were made at all. What I'm saying is it was a humorous incident. Firstly, that's the first thing. When it happened live, I really cacked myself laughing because it was just,
and so it was that context that Fox did was poor, that they didn't put that extra bit, and also the title that they had on it, which I think they thought was humorous, but it didn't work.
But I think it's fair to say, and I'm not actually trying to denigrate anybody here, but it is fair to say that Perkins is not in good fitness shape. There's no doubt about that. And if the comments were just sort of that she needs to improve her fitness or something like that, then I think that would be fair enough. But as has been said in the chat, like when Stuart Dew and others were well overweight, that the media used to give them a very hard time about that particular aspect. And I think that if you're going to present yourself as an athlete and you're not in the appropriate condition for that, you are going to leave yourself open for comments. And I'm not talking about the type of comments that you're talking about on social media where people are really nasty and trying to tear the living strips off her and make her look, well, some of the things there were terrible, and I totally support that comment. But you are going to get negative comments about her level of fitness, and I think they're fair.
Well, the fact is that's also taking it out of the context, Macca, in that she has lost a lot of weight. That celebration came after she kicked a goal from a really good lead, which she beat the young girl who got the Rising Star for this round. So a younger girl who's actually quicker. Perkins actually beat her on the lead in order to take that mark.
Nikki,
so I'm sorry, you can't talk about her fitness not being up to scratch.
Yes, I can.
And comparing her, no, Macca, let me finish. Macca, let me finish, please. And comparing her in a third season of a game of a league that has only been going for 3 seasons up against somebody like Stuart Dew, etc., who I actually disagree with those comments. Probably shouldn't get said in the way they're often said. As you said, there's better ways of expressing it. But they're coming from something where they've been training for that elite standard. Now, those guys, even back then, had a lot more time to train than what Perko does now. So there's very much a big difference there. There's also a huge issue, which unfortunately does have to come into it, regarding the way women's bodies are policed as opposed to men's bodies. So that's something you kind of can't take out of the discussion. I hate that it has to be brought up, but it's something that also needs to be considered in terms of the society and the shaming that happens, particularly towards women who are not in that right particular shape.
I think we're at cross purposes though, Nikki. I think there's 2 issues here. The one issue is that Sarah is unfit, and there's reasons for that.
She is.
I mean, the most immediate reason is her recent injury, which has not allowed her to train properly. I think Sarah would be the first to admit she's not in peak fitness, and I don't think there's any problem with anyone commenting to that effect, because it's a fact. She's not fit. But I think where you're coming from, and I agree wholeheartedly, is the derogatory nature of it. And whether it be male or female, it's immaterial. I don't think there's any... But by the same token, Nick, we do have free speech in this country.
No, we don't.
We actually do.
No, we don't have the right. We do not have the right to free speech. We have the right to freedom of expression, which is different. We think of free speech
That's simply
as
not
it is
true.
the US one.
That's simply
we don't
not
have
true.
a constitution, and it is not ingrained in it, which is how most people argue that point.
No, it's simply not true. Otherwise, half of Twitter would be moderated in this country, and the simple fact is it's not. So I'm not condoning anyone being derogatory or trollish or flippant with regards to describing Sarah or putting her down or whatever, because the simple fact is she's out there doing it and they're not, which makes her 1,000% better than everyone bagging her anyway. But
spot on. I'd love to see some of those guys kick a goal like that.
Well, yeah, that's right. But by the same token, I think that people that are in the world of sport or media or entertainment or any other public sphere have to have a certain amount of resilience. And at the end of the day, if they can't handle the crap that goes on in social media, they should delete their account.
Correct.
Just lightening the load a little bit there.
And that makes the trolls win.
No one's winning because the trolls are trying to get a reaction. And
or
if
they're trying to get people to leave.
Yeah, but I mean, if you've everyone who's had kids knows that if you feed into a kid's tantrum, they'll just keep going. But if you ignore them, they'll shut up eventually. Anyway,
and it happened to everybody. I mean, try being on Twitter and say that you oppose gay marriage. Try being on Twitter and saying that you oppose, refugees, or that. I mean, Twitter is just it's a hideous pile-on.
Twitter's a bad thing to use because you're allowed to get away with a lot on Twitter that they will not police. So Twitter is a bad one to use.
I think we're all agreed that it was some pretty nasty stuff. I just want to have a couple of quick hellos. It's great to see the chat alive and well tonight. Really nice to see Mark Reed. I'll give you a shout out because he came to us via Facebook, I reckon. So good to see him joining the chat. Good to see Adam Sherry there, obviously from through the Peninsula Strawberry down there, and Matthew Hoare is driving all the way to the Copper Coast tonight listening to us live. So really good to have everybody on board in the chat room tonight.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of people listening on Facebook, which is good. Don't forget you can listen on Facebook as well as via Spreaker. What else have we got in the news? There's a fair amount of other stuff.
Oh, see, this is why we need a donkey tonight.
No,
because there was the AFLX draft.
Oh well, yeah, okay. That was going to be another special feature, but let's talk about it now.
I just want to give a quick mini cockwomble to the fact that they're playing it at Marvel Stadium. They're wearing like these superhero type themes, etc., that they're trying to promote because the whole thing, superheroes, Marvel, and so the players mention some superheroes, but they mention DC ones, not Marvel. Whoops.
Yeah,
just a little bit of Crow's news, Fiend. Is the under-23 game that's coming up on Saturday, February 23rd, 11 a.m. at Thebby Oval.
Yep.
Crows versus Port, and one of the exceptions to the under-23 boys will be that Brad Crouch is going to have a run in that game as well, and that's going to be really good. I might even try and see if I can get out to that because you see our recent draftees and rookies plus last year's up against Port Adelaide's and I don't think the result means a lot, but it's would be very good to see who plays good footy under a little bit of match pressure. So I think that'll be a very interesting exercise.
And just a recommendation, because Thebby's a huge oval still. Remember, go old school, bring your binoculars if you actually want to see some of the play over the other side.
Is the grandstand still up there?
Clubs.
Yeah, but remember it's a bit set back.
It's not a great viewing ground, Thebby, to be honest. But
No.
I enjoyed the AFLW games there.
Be that as it may, I think it's a really good idea by the clubs to get together and put out something like this. Just give something for the supporters to have a look at, and it also gives the young boys a bit of a look at where they're at. So it was a good idea, I think, by both clubs.
Yeah,
It also shows, I think, I think the JLT games that Adelaide are going to probably put out their better sides for those two games.
Well, I was going to say, Macca, don't forget too that those young lads have been training a little bit longer than the more seniors, so they're probably a little bit more conditioned, and they're probably looking for a bit of match practice. Having started pre-season a couple of weeks early, so but it's great to see Brad Crouch getting a green light, because you would expect that if there was any issues that he'd be nursed through the pre-season, but the fact that he's getting a run, touch wood for God's sakes, is a real positive sign for his 2019 season as well.
Well, I had a really chuckle when I was reading the Crows news. One of the news items was that Brad Crouch wasn't injured. I thought, we're so used to him being injured that it's news when he's not.
Good to see Vardy Magic popping in with the fact that Thebarton was his home in the 80s. Vardy Magic, would that mean that you're perhaps Ian the Rooster Wallace, or maybe even Neville Rocky Roberts? That we could have quite a famous old Torrens player in the midst.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think I've mentioned once before that I've seen Don Pike's brother hit a 6 over the Torrens or Thebby grandstand in an A-grade district game. So that was probably my highlight of the Thebarton Oval. And just before we go on, I've got to say, we've got John from Atlanta, Georgia, listening on Facebook, which is just amazing. So g'day, John. Thanks very much for joining us. And I don't know whether you're an expat Aussie or an AFL convert in America, but it's fantastic to have you along.
Just a slight digression back to Thebarton Oval. I do have almost a horror memory. As a kid, I was actually at Thebarton Oval the day that Westies played Torrens, and that was the day that Westies asked for a count. I don't know if anybody remembers that.
Robbie Muir jumping the fence.
And Normie Dare was the guy that jumped the fence, and right. Number 20 for Torrens, and Normie Dare jumped the fence. It was right where I was sitting, and the people near us put bloody rugs over him, and they hit him.
He was standing next to me, Pete.
It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, did the guy next to me put the overcoat on him?
Well, I must have been sitting right near you, Macca. Yeah. But I was a kid. So, funny.
Macca was 50.
Funny times.
I'm going to kill you guys.
Pete was 8, and Macca was had his first grandchild.
Just a very vocal spectator at that stage.
Oh, dear. What else have we got? Do we want to just... I want to digress, Pete. This isn't a Crows story, but it's an SANFL story. Sure. But you might have some intel, and it came across, and you might have noticed this as well. What's happening down at Westies? They've just thrown out the board.
Is that right? I honestly haven't caught up with that.
Our good friend Pete Lee Harradine got the flick as president of West Adelaide by phone. And apparently all board positions have been thrown open. And
when did this happen?
This happened a couple of weeks ago.
I've not seen a peep.
Yep.
About that. Not a peep.
Yeah, so many lamenting the corporatisation of SANFL clubs. And it seems like there's some sort of corporate takeover down there at West Adelaide, which is very disappointing. And I'm only raising this because, and Pete, you back this up, Lee is like heart and soul down at West Adelaide. He's probably their longest-serving volunteer. Yep. Has done everything. But, I mean, he was running water when my lad was playing under-18s down there. And he just did everything. And it was the same where you and I played cricket as well, Pete. And why would an SANFL club, struggling for members, struggling for volunteers, all the rest of it, just absolutely pull the pants down of an absolute club stalwart? I just don't understand it.
And told him by phone.
That's just
appalling.
Yep.
That's and Westies have got a bit of form in that area. They've done that over the years. They've not been great with their boards, from time to time. But that is a shocker. And Lee was, he was head trainer when I was playing under 17s down there. I mean, it was just, that's how long ago he's been involved with that club and been volunteering. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I look at how that's not made any kind of media at all. I'm really, really surprised.
Yeah, well, if we do have any Westies supporters on chat or listening during the week, flick us a tweet or a DM if you're on Twitter if you know anything about it. I've put a few feelers out, but haven't come up with any additional information. But you and I joke about Sturt and West and all the rest of it, but there's certainly a divergence between Sturt have gone about rebuilding their club and embracing past players and supporters, and Westies apparently just bailing everyone out. So
terrible.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the Crows. What else have we got?
Well, there was a game of footy played on the weekend.
No, we're not there yet, Macca. Just stick to the script, mate. We've got Jason Paul-Pleasures back at the club. What's he doing? He's a runner, isn't he?
Yeah, so he's running for both the SANFL and the AFL side. Yeah. And part of the reason why, with the interview with him, said that why they got him back into the club was with the restriction on the runner's time on the ground, that Pike and Burton were very keen for somebody who actually has quite a strong football background, so that ability to very quickly tell the players what they need to hear, etc., as opposed to the fitness guys who don't have that football background. So the messaging might have to take a bit longer from them.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
Well, and speaking of Wesley's, Porps spent a couple of years running the juniors down there once he retired. So really good to see him progress through the ranks and maybe a coach in waiting in the future.
Well, he's doing some development coaching as well with us on top of the running. So he'll be a valuable addition to the club because, when it came to schools, there weren't too many guys who had better skills than Porps.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that we did miss a really, really big one, and that was raised in the chat, and that was the Optus as the major sponsor. So our Guernsey will now be carrying Optus on the back rather than Toyota, which it has since we've been in the comp. So, apparently it's a very big amount of money that they're sponsoring us for. Toyota.
Multi-million a year.
Beg pardon?
It was said to be a multi-million deal a year, and somebody pointed out a tweet from one of the AFL journalists in that when you have a sponsor who is a competitor to the AFL's overall sponsor, so Telstra, and Optus is a competitor to it, it has to be over $1 million is the minimum sponsorship that they can do for the year for them to be allowed.
Yeah. So I think that's fantastic. Actually, I noticed that our rivals down the road they announced a new sponsor that doesn't pay his bills or something like that.
No, it just doesn't pay his employees, his contractors.
Yes. So I thought I'd rather have Optus. I think.
Has anybody been following or seen those quite bizarre contributions on social media from Michelangelo Ricci just regarding potential conflict between the Crows and the Power? Has anyone been following that?
Oh, I did see it, but I didn't know what it was all about.
I don't know if anyone does.
Well,
okay. I thought it was just me.
I think, Pete, the simple fact, and I don't want to give Ricci too much airtime on our show, but I think it's just a product of him trying to promote his, I guess you'd call it a show, a spot on SEN Adelaide. I don't think anyone listens to it. Not many people can listen to it because it's not actually on the radio dial. You have to have a digital reception or listen to podcasts or whatever. But it just seems to be muckraker. Kane Corns, who's his partner in crime, he's doing similar things. writing clickbait tweets with no real substance. And let's face it, that's been the basis of Rucci's approach for a number of years now.
But that SEN, I don't know. I've never bothered to listen to it, quite frankly, because of who they've got on it. And I don't think they'd get any following out of Crow supporters, I would have thought.
And interesting that today, apparently, Keith Thomas was due to go on 5AA and said no and went on SEN instead. Now, 5AA is an actual sponsor of Port.
Yes.
They no longer sponsor us. They only sponsor Port.
Now, that was last year. Is that the case this year, though, Nikki? Because I think the Triple M deal with the Crows has kind of waned a little bit, I guess you'd say.
So our radio sponsor this year is Hit 107 and Triple M.
Yeah. Look,
yeah,
I mean,
actually, they were upset on 5AA because they were getting bombarded on some issue by Port supporters. They made that particular comment on air that they actually resent some of the comments they get, saying that they're anti-Port when they actually sponsor Port Adelaide and they don't sponsor the Crows.
I think the simple fact of the matter is that, and one of the reasons why we continue and why we put this up is because the standard of media coverage in this state is woeful. And I don't think, personally, not that I've given it a lot of time, but I don't think SEN are adding to that. I think they've taken a position and they've decided to play up to the little brother down the road. That's what it seems to be like. Port people would suggest that that's what 5AA have been doing for 30 years, and maybe that's a fair comment, maybe it's not, I don't know. But, what happened to the days of impartial journalism and good reporting and unbiased opinions? I mean, when advertising dollars become the be-all and end-all,
and your reach is severely dropped.
Yeah. So, I mean, to your point, Pete, I haven't seen anything further from Rucci. I don't think he's released anything. He was talking about a flashpoint. Nobody seems to know what it is. He hasn't expanded on it. And to me, it seemed like clickbait.
Yep, you're most likely right. But he mentioned, some of the follow-up, he mentioned something about an ex-coach and a former federal parliamentarian, and who knows.
Well, I think he was returning. I think he was referring to Malcolm Blight when it came to the ex-coach, because Blighty made some comments that were justified about Jack Watts, and we discussed Blighty's comments last week and thought they were probably a bit harsh, but on balance, And
Blighty says what Blighty wants to say, and nobody controls Blighty.
Yeah, and maybe an ex-politician. There's a number of ex-politicians that are Crows ambassadors. It could be one of those. But I mean, seriously, if he's trying to create, I think his attitude reflects SEN's strategy with regards to breaking into the Adelaide market, and that is trying to create some sort of friction between Port and Adelaide supporters, in the hope that Port supporters will migrate across to SEN. So anyway,
just another club thing. I think that Pikey's giving a lot more airtime pre-season than he has in previous years. He's last week it was an article about how much fun we're going to put into the training and the overall approach towards the games, etc., so that the players enjoy themselves. And this week was more about our game style and how we're going to play much more moving the ball a lot faster and a lot quicker. Previously we've always been a very closed shop pre-season, but I think the club has learnt a little bit from last year when everything went really, really sour, and when our friend was involved, and I won't mention Burton. But I think they've done everything pretty well right this year, I think, in terms of their public relations and putting things out there for supporters.
Yeah, you're probably right, Macca. There does seem to be a bit of a lighter air around the club this pre-season, a little bit more approachability, and there was a desire when Mark Shudo came on board and Andrew Fagan came on board and we brought in Walshy, etc. there seemed to be a bit of a closing of the ranks in terms of their dealings with the media, and I think at the time that may well have been justified, and they were trying to put out a unified message, but I think maybe they took it too far to the point where it was almost, a Stalin-esque sort of thing down there, and I think they've realised after the disaster that was last year, trying to control a message that just the media just refused to allow them to control, there has to be some middle ground, and I think it's been refreshing this year from Don. What else have we got, Pete? Nick?
Well, no, I was just going to say that there was an article in the Advertiser today with him, and he talked about that bringing that fun back in, and he knew that even though it was something that's not natural to him to be very public about, but he's been very mindful that from the top down, we need to have more fun.
Yeah, and it's probably the same with any workplace. If you're going to work every day and it's all, head down, bums up and all the rest of it, then you get jaded quite quickly. And I think, you'd hope that they've brought in a little bit of balance. There was, there plenty of rumours of disharmony and factions and all the rest of it amongst the playing group and whatnot. So the easiest way to deal with that is just to lighten things up and bring everyone together with a bit of a laugh and a time and a place for everything. So hopefully that sees the team unified and hitting the ground running with some good spirit.
And of course, the one big change year on year, of course, is that last year we were hitting the airwaves all the time. Well, the only times we were hitting it was negative stuff, either the camp or injury. And at the moment, we're just not having those injuries either. So fingers crossed that we can be able to field close to our best side most games.
Yeah, well, at the moment, we've only got Huey Greenwood, who had a bit of an abdominal strain.
Yep.
Hardigan with his surgery, he's going to be a while, I think. Andrew McPherson, poor old Andrew, just can't take a trick with those groins. And Talia,
but he's running again. And they're slowly increasing his load. So there's some positive news coming out about McPherson.
Yeah.
PJ gave me some little mail that Jordan Butts is impressing incredibly well on the track. And I was thinking, particularly we know what's going on with Hardigan, that he's actually a very strong chance to actually be our first debut for the year.
Well, you'd imagine he'd line up in the 23s game. It'll be very interesting to see how he goes because they'll probably give him a key post. And see how he goes.
He's a big lad, isn't he?
Yeah,
Very tall.
He is.
He'd be. I tell you what, if he came on, he'd be a rip snorter.
Yeah,
but he's size.
Yeah, well, he's from the very, very little that I've seen of him. He's very raw, but we were talking at the end of last season about the need for another key defender, and he might just be a bit of a smoky. We're all very quiet and subdued tonight. Let's lighten things up Don Pike style and talk a little bit more about the AFLX, shall we? Did anyone watch that stupid draft?
No.
Right.
I just watched the little clip they had of them being apparently funny and insulting each other. And it was like, oh, you've just... the impression I got from that bit was that the players were all picked days beforehand. It was all passed by and okayed by the AFL, etc., as to who's available and who's not.
Well, how can it be a draft when Eddie Betts' team was designated Indigenous? So was it just a three-way draft, was it?
Well, he still had to pick players.
Yeah, but he's not picking him ahead of anyone else. No one else is picking up an Indigenous player. That was the whole point, wasn't it? I don't know.
I did get a tweet read out on the radio, apparently. I didn't hear it, but one of my tweets got read out on the radio.
What did it say?
I was calling, if you could have one rule for the AFLX, what would it be? And I just tweeted back that I said that it can't be televised or streamed anywhere within Australia.
Tweet of the year, Pete.
Well done.
It's an early contender.
That got a mention, apparently.
Yeah, well deserved mention.
Having missed the actual draft, I can't remember where I read it, but somebody said they think this will be the best part of the whole AFLX thing, the draft. They said it was quite interesting and quite amusing.
Well, the best thing about the rules for the AFLX is that they're playing shortened quarters. So we won't have to actually endure it for very long. It's only on one night, and they're very short games. So blink and you miss it. I won't be watching it, as I've mentioned previously.
But in all seriousness, though, surely this could only be something they're packaging up for overseas, marketing of the game. They cannot possibly think that they're going to be reaching out to the established market. Surely.
Well, Lee Matthews was waffling on about that on 5AA. He said he thinks it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, but he's
getting
on
quite
the AFL
senile.
Rules Committee.
And he said,
but he's also on the AFL committee, so he'll push the AFL barrow when he gets told.
And he's saying, what could we ask for more than seeing two lots of kids running around rather than one?
I want to know what the clubs are getting out of this, Macca, because we touched on this last week, and I raised the point that they're quite happy to do this, but they're not happy to revive State of Origin. If you have a look at the team list, I'll just read out some players. In Dangerfield's team, you've got Dangerfield, you've got Tommy Hawkins, still side bottom, Blick Avs, Robbie Gray, Andrew Gaff, Luke Parker, Jaden Stevenson, Andrew McGrath, Jack Billings, Daniel Rich, Robbie Tarrant, Jack Steele. They are all not only first 22 players, but in many cases, top 10 players for their club. Can you imagine? What the hell are the clubs getting that makes them think that it's okay to release these players, a week or two before pre-season starts?
It's a very good point. It is a very good point. I don't know, because the clubs don't seem to be kicking and screaming like they would.
Not at all.
If they were trying to put them in a different type of game, like as you say, if it was going to be a State of Origin type game, they'd be really rebelling against it. And yet there hasn't been even a yelp. And
nope.
And then we've got people like Matthews, who's obviously very AFL minded, who comes out and openly supports it.
Yep. Another team, Nat Fife, Bontempelli, Pendlebury, Rance, Cameron, Heaney, Caniglio, Laird, Boak, Hunter, Aaliyah, Hurley, Kennedy, Higgins. These are all first 22 players. Rory Sloane is playing. He struggled all last season with foot injury, and yet he's playing. What the hell? What's going on? Why are the clubs so rolling over about this? I know it's just exhibition and it's probably not going to be much contact and all the rest of it, but these are big name players that are playing this competition.
Which says that mostly that the AFL saying that they have to have those top line players, because last year they didn't, and I think the AFL was obviously quite pissed about that because the clubs in their teams put all their young ones through. Yeah,
but the question is then, Nikki, what leverage is the AFL using to get the clubs to put these... I guess that's my point. What are they using to get the clubs to put these players up?
There must be some kind of strategic intent. They're not just... the AFL aren't just doing this for a bit of pre-season fun. This is now... They're trying to grow this. They've changed the format. They're trying to grow it, and there'll be strategic. You can bet that somewhere behind there'll be strategic intent, and that there would be some carrot for the clubs to be supporting it in the way that they are now. I'm not quite sure what the intent would be, and I think that we'll only see it as it plays out over the next probably 5 years, I suppose. But there would be something brewing at AFL House.
A deal has been struck. A deal has been struck, whether it's with the AFLPA or with the AFL.
Something.
Yeah, because there's no way in the world that a club would give a rat's ass about the development offshore of the AFL brand when they've got a premiership to win.
I reckon no way. Money.
What are the captains getting paid?
50 grand.
Right. And who was the first captain named?
Dangerfield.
Yep. What is Dangerfield? head of the Players Association.
Absolutely.
So you think he's not going to say no to that 50 grand?
Yep. So the players get us. I think they're getting 10 grand. I think is it?
No, but it's more than that, because they could put up that money for a State of Origin game that everyone in Australia would love. So why is it this? And this is the point I think that Pete's raising. There's a longer term strategy.
I think Pete's on the money. He's on the money on that, I reckon.
And it's also why they've tried to push the conferences into the AFLW, and we've seen with the results just from this second week, it's just ridiculous. The conferences just no.
But I think FEMA's making the point. What are the clubs getting at? There's got to be something in for the clubs, because they wouldn't be as quiet as they are about it otherwise. Now I haven't seen one negative comment by any club at all. So surely they must be giving them money or something like that as well.
Well, it's either they're getting something, Macca, or my feeling is that they're not losing something. I think a deal has been struck somewhere along the way where the AFL have basically, or the clubs have asked for something, and the AFL have basically gone, well, if you want that, then you need to release your players for this. I don't think there's any cash incentive. I don't think there's anything other than the AFL have used some sort of leverage against the clubs to get these players released, because they're all first 22 players. It's at a time in the pre-season that's critical in terms of injury management, and it's a fast, free-flowing game of AFLX. It'll be the first hit out, apart from match simulation training at clubs for all of these players, and yet, all the reasons that we're saying are the very reasons why the AFL have put up, and the AFLPA have put up in the past, for why State of Origin will never work. And yet here we are with a stupid exhibition game, ignoring all those reasons. There's something behind it, and I wish someone would dig it up.
But as we know, the AFL media don't want to bite the hand that feeds it.
Well, no, and
because
that's
even
right.
though the coaches haven't said anything, there have been some questions, and they haven't said a lot about it. They haven't been effusive in praise or anything else. They've just been, the comments I've seen are just very on the line of, oh yeah, we hope they don't get injured, etc. Or we might we'll see which players we make available, and being fairly non-committal about it, which I found very interesting.
Well, as far as I know, the draft encompassed every player on every list in the AFL. Unless a player was injured, then he wasn't precluded from the draft. So as far as I'm aware, anyone could have been picked up. So every player in the AFL was made available for this stupid exhibition. Every player. It's unprecedented. You wouldn't even get that for State of Origin.
No.
Back in the heyday, you didn't get that in the State of Origin.
Fane, it's a corporate entity, and we know from their conduct in the last sort of, say, 5 years that they are hell-bent on growth. Absolutely hell-bent on growth, and there's only so far you can grow a domestic game, the way the AFL is. And so, this quite clearly now is a strategic move to growth. And I can't put my finger on it. I can't visualise how it ends up, but it will be part of their growth plan. As per, as we saw with the Suns and the Giants. It's all about growth, and they've got to keep going, keep growing the competition. And this is obviously an area that they've, I assume, has researched and decided that this is something that they need to chuck money at, and the clubs are, as you quite rightly point out, are clearly on board.
Yep, interesting times, Peter. Interesting times for the development of the game. They're obviously looking for a square ground game that they can promote to soccer countries and rugby countries and whatnot.
Yeah.
So they're playing it at Marvel Stadium, which is round.
Yeah, well, they are
right.
this time, but I mean, the game is easily adapted to a soccer pitch.
When is the game actually being played?
22nd of February.
That's a Friday night. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a really quick shout out to a couple of people on Facebook. I love reading these, and I don't know about other people, but Paul says hello from Brisbane, and we've got Dan there from the Sunshine Coast. I don't know about you guys, but I still find it quite amazing that we've got. Finn, obviously, there was one that you mentioned earlier, John from Atlanta, Georgia. I still find it amazing that people from all around tune in. It's great. So thank you for everybody for that.
All right. I think that's enough of the news. Why don't we have a listen to Nikki wrap up the AFLW game when I find the stinking music. Hang on. Here we go. That's all. And
they were bloody lucky Carlton. They were bloody lucky Carlton tired. That's all I'll say.
Oh, what?
They were bloody lucky that Carlton got tired.
Oh, I'll give us some credit.
Oh, yeah, it was. We and it's something I've kind of known, I've suspected that fast teams we will have a problem with. The loss of Randall was huge. Carlton did also have Taylor Harris out, but she's been fairly blanketed. But I think against any other team, she would have been a bigger loss as opposed to against us, because it's normally Randall who does play on her and pretty much takes her out of the equation. So it wasn't quite a like-for-like loss on both the sides. I really liked that ball movement. That was I think, from both sides. I mean, that would have been the game that the AFL was most pleased to see, because that's what they've been trying to push, that it was fairly high scoring for AFLW. You had fast, open footy. There were some really nice skills on display, and it was still also a good hard game of football. Chloe Shear was a bit better. I would say, though, that I talked up Maisie Nanquell last week, and this week I don't know what she was playing, but it didn't quite seem to be football. So she was kind of on my slight disappointment list, but Hatchie, who had a great game last week, had another really good game again this week.
Really good numbers from Hatchard.
Yeah.
Excellent numbers.
Yeah, liked her game.
22 touches and let's have a look here. 12 contested possessions. Was very solid from Hatchard.
Yeah, I thought our forward line looked a lot better, and I think that possibly came about with they've had one game experience now of actually playing together against an opposition. And Perkins, even though, yes, she's still a bit of a liability when the ball hits the deck, in some instances, she straightens us up. And just how many times did we kick into that corridor? And Carlton gave us the corridor. And we were just pushing that into the forward 50 so nicely. I mean, Phoenix, have you got the stats on like the forward 50 entries? It was some ridiculous number.
Yeah, it was stupid. I remember it being said. Hang on a minute. I'll probably tell you in a second. Keep talking. I'll come to it.
Vardy Magic asked who laced out Tex, and I think that was actually Hatchard.
Hatchard, yeah.
Yeah, who did that lovely pass. Considine was. I think she'll have a game soon where she'll really, really break it open, I think. So for somebody with her only being her second game of football, she looks completely at home on an Aussie rules footy field.
Inside 50s were 42-23, by the way.
Yeah, and Hannah Martin was actually our best player for the inside 50 entries. So she played nicely for Westies last year. She's slight. I think her younger sister is actually slightly better than her. But that's a nice little thing. And I think we have to kind of leave it to the end and just say, Stevie Lee, what a game.
Well, a bit of a breakout game for Stevie, I would have thought.
Oh, she was the X factor that won, in my opinion, really won the game, because in the past, we've had similar situations where the ball's been spoilt and gone to ground and just cleared, whereas with her pace and the ability to be in the right spot and then react very, very quickly, 4 goals from in 4 short quarters like that's just a great contribution. Terrific game.
Yeah, and she went at nearly 77% disposal efficiency. And, one thing that stood out for me in that game was that we were far cleaner, and the ball use, actually from both sides, but particularly from Adelaide, was far better. And I think you touched on it, Nikki, and I think we spoke about it last week. We predicted that having Perko back in the team just pushed us back into the corridor.
Yeah. And it gave, even when she wasn't on the field, there was that structure was better in place up forward. And I think because of just having her in that rotation, that this is kind of the way we structure that forward line up a bit better. And she was a lot better. She's still a little lax on her defensive chasing.
Zero, almost zero.
Yeah, that little piece of play where I think we got the kick out of the back lines, where she did that one-handed pickup on the wing and did the pass into the middle, which then Stevie Lee's running goal. Now, if you actually watch the vision, that handball that then goes to Stevie Lee, right behind her is actually Chloe Shear. So Chloe's not slow because Stevie's quite quick, and she's done that follow-up. Now, the fact that she's willing to do that run where there's a chance for her to score, she needs to do that in order to get the ball back and do a defensive forward kind of thing. But she's only 18. She's missed a year of footy with an ACL. I just think there's a few little things that need to be fixed up for her to take that extra step, and she'll become quite a force in the competition.
I reckon Clark's got he's got a pretty good game plan going at the moment. We should have won last week but for ridiculous kicking at goal.
Exactly the same scoring shots, Macca, last week and this week.
Yeah, it was actually, but a bit of the other way around. It's definitely around the centre half forward area. It's definitely crossing the ball straight back into the middle, and it's a very logical thing to do. And because if you do get the possession there, and your players know that that's what you're doing, they'll be there. You get a much better shot at goal. And I reckon Clark and they were playing on at all costs as well. So I thought overall, I think Clark's got them playing a pretty good brand of footy. I think he's going to be a good coach for them.
I'm still not sure whether it's a sustainable style. I think it's a style to aspire to, Macca. But I don't know. I mean, pardon me. The girls played quite well on a reasonably large ground at Icon and got a bit of space and room to move. But in closer quarters of the parade the week before, under that increased pressure, that high possession game really didn't work out. So I'm still on the fence about whether it's sustainable for this team at this time.
Well, I thought that the other thing that he did very well last week, I was very critical that Phillips was in the middle. I thought that we really needed Phillips up forward because we were lacking up there. This week, with the other co-captain out at centre half back, I think it was important that Phillips was in the guts and therefore around the play all the time and directing and assisting. And she played a very, very good game. I noticed one thing, though, she's lost a little pace, in my opinion. And she was, although she was being tagged very, very closely. So it was very hard for her to break clear it. But I thought she had a big influence on the game.
Well, she's actually changed her running style. So she's had to learn how to run differently, which is what she was doing in the off-season. And for me, that's where some of that hesitation comes in, that I think she's thinking about how she moves instead of it being instinctively.
You could be right, because she isn't moving quite as instinctively.
No, and I also think that she's possibly also still a little bit worried of, I don't want to do an injury. And I think the more the game went on...
35 years old.
Yeah, and you're more prone. So I think she's a lot more mindful of those kind of things. But it was very interesting in the aftermatch that Clarkey was asked about, playing her in the midfield versus up forward. And he actually said, we generally actually leave that up to her as to when she switches and when she thinks where she's needed on the field. And that she's got that license to go, okay, now I'll go forward. So she was actually, and this is why Maddie Prasvakis, the young Carlton player who was one of the Rising Star noms for this week and had a really excellent game as well. And even though they were slightly manning up on each other a little bit, the problem then came because Erin was in the middle and Erin would then drop back to the forward line. And whoever we had then covering her space wasn't getting there quick enough if Carlton then got the ball and Prasakis was then able to get a bit more free up forward. So that needs to be worked on a bit better about getting that switch happening quicker and a bit more instinctively. But to me, it's a very men's AFL style.
Yeah, it is.
And I quite like that. I did. It was something that was said to me about our team that I played in, even though we're only Div 3, but we had a male coach and the structures that he was getting us to play. We used to have opponents saying, but you don't play women's structures, you play men's structures. And I've always been confused by that, just going, but it's football, you play football structures.
Mm.
I still don't understand what a women's structure is.
Well, I mean, it comes back down to capabilities, and I guess that feeds into my earlier point about whether it's sustainable or not, or whether it's aspirational. And I think what you're probably describing is more basic versus advanced rather than male versus female or whatever.
Yeah,
that's just the way. But I mean, you know, where are all the people whinging about goal scoring now? There was, 14 goals kicked in a half a footy in that game on Sunday. And
we were 17 points down, which is normally a death knell in AFLW, and then we kicked, 6 of the last 7 goals.
Exactly. So, you know, people are quick to bag, and as we've said before, we're far more inclined to back the girls in and recognise what they're doing. And I felt it was quite a entertaining game to watch, especially the second half. Lots of goals, lots of free-flowing ball movement, some good skills, and Crows win. All good as far as I'm concerned.
And for me, for our team, the advantage was seeing Carlton tire and us go ahead, which tells me we rectified the issue we had last year, which is the first year we were probably the fittest of all the AFLW teams. Last year we seemed to keep to the same level and everybody else then came up and went a little bit ahead of us. I'm thinking that we've possibly gone back to that model of actually getting our fitness up ahead of the other teams once again, except for possibly, North Melbourne. I think they're, even after 2 games, they're looking very, very potent. So it'll be interesting to see. We've got Geelong this week, back, as you say, Phoenix, on that narrower ground. And Geelong haven't been too bad. Be interesting to see how we then go.
Yeah.
One interesting thing about the game was, I think one of the biggest turning points in the game was Marinoff, who was tagged very, very heavily in the first half, and by her own standards, had minimal possessions. And one stage, I was wondering whether she was on the ground. I couldn't find her, and she, as I said, she'd been tagged that heavily. But her second half, I thought was very inspirational and just showed that a good player, and she is a good player, she's a very good player, can fight their way through adversity and eventually she gave a tag a hiding and got right on top in the second half. And I thought she was really one of the most principal factors in our drive in the second half.
Yeah, I think she's gone that step up again from last year. Like the game this week wasn't as good as her game last week, but yeah, you're spot on with that, Macca, that she was still getting her tackles and doing the rest of the stuff up that she needs to do, and she just kept working at it and finally was able to then break the tag with them kind of that little drop off, and they just couldn't match up and help the tag out, etc. The one thing I have noticed is Clarkie's very he uses the rotations a lot. So we use a lot of rotations. So, but and Marinoff often sits on the bench for quite a long time. And I think we possibly do that at the start, and then she plays more minutes towards the end of the game.
And the other person who I think really deserves a mention is Alan. I thought she is an outstanding player in the defence and played a top game in my opinion.
Reads the play beautifully, and she reminds me very much of who her coach is in Caven. She plays very similar to him. You can kind of see that influence very strong, and is also naturally attacking player. That bits on one of the intercept marks she took on the wing, and she's just like, "Nah, I'm just taking off here."
She does, doesn't she? Yeah.
And she's got a lovely long kick on her.
Another player who actually improved their game week on week too was what's her name, Young Jones. I thought she had a terrible game in the first half, but I thought she got a couple of goals, and she's an opportunist type player, and I thought she got into the game a lot more this week too.
Yeah, she's still going to get a bit more involved.
Yes, I definitely agree with that.
But you're right that she's becoming, because when she does get it, she always creates something out of almost nothing. She's got that ability, but she's just got to get that little bit more involved. But youngster, it'll come.
So we've got the Cats, as you mentioned, Nikki, next Sunday at 2 p.m. So Sunday afternoon on the 17th at Norwood Oval. And hopefully another rip-roaring game. I don't know, Pete's moonlighting, doing something else with all that heavy breathing going on there, mate. I don't know what you're doing.
I'm just listening to the experts, mate. Listening to the experts.
Look, and I think that might be it for tonight. We've hit the hour. Pete's falling asleep. We've done the AFLW. Nikki needs to go back to bed. Macca's probably going to go troll on Facebook or something, and I might go and have some tea.
No, he's going to supervise Mrs. Macca doing the dishes.
There we go.
I'll wait for supper from Mrs. Macca, and as I normally do.
One of these days, we're going to get her on.
Yeah, we are.
She has threatened to come on. That's my great fear.
So just as we wrap up, don't forget, as I mentioned before, if you would like to sponsor one of the shows during the season, hit us up on Facebook or Twitter on private messages, or you can send me a message on Big Footy, and would be happy to have you on board. Don't forget, Patreon's open. Those tiers will be filled up before the season commences. We have how many more weeks until JLT starts now? Is it 2? 3?
3, I think.
3.
Yeah. So
what is it, 2nd of March?
Yeah, I think so. So we'll have our season preview right around the corner, Pete, I would imagine.
Yep.
And Kim Ryder, pardon me, we talked about last week. He might make a bit of an appearance next week on the podcast to talk about the board situation, which we haven't really covered so far tonight. So, on that note, I reckon we give it up and say goodnight, gentlemen and lady. Thanks for joining us.
You've ever been called a lady?
I was going to say, and Nikki.
A shout out to all the people that participate in the chat tonight. It's great to see that community sort of grow. It seems to grow every episode. So we really like having that input from people. It's terrific.
Yes, absolutely.
Where did we get half our ideas from?
Well, the fact that we're getting so many people to listen so early in the season is quite humbling. So we do appreciate everyone's support. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter. Hit up our website, and we'll motor on through the pre-season and get to round 1. And in the meantime, everyone stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Not all.